So, let's start this way. In one of his books, well-known German pastor, theologian by the name of Dietrich Bonhoeffer wrote this: "When Christ calls a man, he bids him come and die." He wrote those words in 1937. How's that for a slogan that you put on the front of a church, right? Come and die. You need to know, 7 years later, he would experience those words firsthand. Dietrich Bonhoeffer was one of the few Christians, a leader in Germany, who was willing to take a stand against the Nazi party of his time and all the atrocities that they carried out. He eventually joined an effort with other people to try to oust Hitler from power. They were found out, and Bonhoeffer and the others were arrested and sent to a concentration camp. After 18 months, he was hanged for his crimes. And he lived out those words that he wrote, that when Christ calls a man, he bids him come and die. Now, why am I starting off with Dietrich Bonhoeffer in Nazi Germany? Well, because he said these words. When he did, he was drawing from the words of Jesus. The words that we wish Jesus would have never said, but often in our 21st century world, we water down the words because we've got 20 centuries worth of knowledge behind them. They're these words: "Whoever wants to be my disciple must deny themselves, take up their cross, and follow me." Now, we've been talking about things that we wish Jesus never said, and in this particular one, Jesus is referring to a Roman rule that is foreign to us. You see, taking up your cross was referring to the way that the Romans would execute criminals. Criminals were forced to carry a wooden beam to the place of their killing where they could be nailed to it. And so what Jesus is saying to the early disciples, the ones who knew what that really was, he's telling them, in order to follow me, you'll have to die. And they're like, what? Really? I wish you never said that. Like die? Like dead die? Yeah. I wish Jesus never said that. I wish my faith could be a little more simple. So hey, before I get deeper, just a reminder that we do have a group that meets on Wednesday nights at 6:30, and we met last week. If you want to jump in this week, even though you weren't there last week, that's fine. Please come. It's in the coffee shop at 6:30. There's childcare available as well that will be starting at 15 minutes before the session, so certainly come and be a part of that. And also out in the lobby, as well as from our website, right on the very front page, you can click a place for the series and the study guides. We want you to get into God's Word on your own or with your group, maybe with a class. So please take advantage of those things. Now, I want to back up a little bit, and I want to walk you through where this particular event came from, this saying of Jesus, because it all starts with this huge, incredible moment where the disciples get something. They have an aha moment, and where something finally sinks in. And this rings a bell with me because I can remember way, way back in the day when I was in college, which seems like forever to me, but I can remember being in a statistics class in particular. I hated statistics classes. Anybody take statistics? Oh, okay, it's not just me. Anybody love statistics? Of course, the engineer in the back loves statistics. Oh, over here, the attorney. Man, I struggled with statistics. It seemed like no matter how many times the professor would say something over and over, it just sounded like Charlie Brown's teacher. And if you don't know who Charlie Brown's teacher was, it just like, wah, 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 wah. And so, on a rare occasion, they would say something enough times and it would click. And I'd be like, oh, I get it. Or at least I got it enough to actually get the answer. Whether I understood it or not didn't matter. I just had to get the right answer, right? It was this aha moment. And then it seemed like teachers, the good teachers, know that when all of a sudden you get it, they take you on to the next lesson. And that is what's happening in this story here with Jesus. He's there with the disciples. He asks them, who do people say that I am? And they give him answers. Some say that you're a prophet. Some say you are like John the Baptist. Some say you are Elijah. And then he asks the disciples, okay, but who do you say I am? And Peter jumps in. Peter's disciple that we talk about often in the church. He jumps in And he says, Jesus, you are the Messiah, the Son of the living God. And Jesus is like, you get it. Way to go. He's elated. In fact, he tells Peter, he says, Peter, you are blessed, and I'm going to build my church upon you. And not just a church, but the church and the kingdom, the keys to the kingdom of heaven, and none of the powers of this world or the powers of hell could even touch you, which, by the way, is a pretty good attaboy, right? All I know is my teachers never said anything that kind to me. So that's what's happening right here. They finally get something, and Jesus, like any good teacher, is like, all right, you got that part, now let's move on to the next step. And that's where this reading picked up that you heard. In Matthew's version, chapter 16, Jesus then began to explain to his disciples that he's going to have to go to Jerusalem, which is the capital city where the temple of the Lord is at, that he's going to go there and suffer many things at the hands of the elders and the chief priests and the teachers of the law, the religious elite, the pastor of pastors, essentially. He says, and then I'll be killed, and on the third day I'll be raised to life. Now, what you're about to see really says a lot about Peter, remember? The one who understood it, who got it, who the church is going to be built upon, who not even the kingdom of hell can overtake. Peter, in his arrogance and his personal agenda, he does this. Peter then took Jesus aside, and I love this version, and it began to reprimand Jesus, saying, you would think at this point Peter would understand who Jesus was, right? He said, you're the Son of the living God. But here he is, reprimanding, your version might say rebuking. Heaven forbid, Lord, he said, this will never happen to you. This, by the way, is I think Peter's things I wish Jesus never said moment happens. Because Jesus is such a good teacher. He wants Peter to know something and to learn and to grow in his understanding. And not just Peter, but the other disciples that are there. And so with tenderness and empathy, Jesus looks right at Peter and he says, get behind me, Satan. Oh, that escalated quickly, didn't it? Get behind me, Satan. You're a stumbling block to me, and you do not have in mind the concerns of God, but merely human concerns. I mean, wait, Peter, I'm going to build a church on you. You know, you're the man. You got it figured out to get behind me, Satan. Whew. What movie was it? Anchorman, I think. Ron Burgundy. Well, that escalated quickly, you know. That went downhill fast. You know, 1 second, it's you're amazing. The next, you are Satan. And I wonder why. You know, why would Jesus respond so harshly? I think he did it because Jesus often speaks in very hyperbolic, strong words. I think he did it because he knew that Peter and the other disciples would need to understand this. He needs them to see that it is way too easy for us to start thinking about our human thoughts and our conventional wisdom. He needs us to think differently. He needs them to think bigger than what they fully understand. He needs them to be thinking about this movement that he's actually creating, the one that is about to start. And listen, and if they don't get this in this moment, if they don't get this, there's no Christianity. You have to understand that. If they don't get this in this moment, we are not here doing what we do. If they don't get this, nobody will experience the fullness of God and God's love as we see it in Christ Jesus. Jesus has their full attention now. I mean, if Jesus were to come in here and call me Satan, he'd have all your attention, right? And so he's got their attention, and then he says, whoever wants to be my disciple must deny themselves and take up their cross and follow me. Again, take up your cross, the death. Peter had just confessed Jesus as the Messiah. Peter had just made a powerful statement of belief. Up here, he got it. He understood who Jesus was. But I think what's happening here is Jesus is reminding us that a verbal confession, an intellectual understanding, a statement of beliefs is not enough to be called a disciple of Jesus. That's what we see in this line. That it's not enough to just know, which means, as followers of Jesus, if you're a Jesus follower, your mission is to actually get busy following Jesus, not just believe that Jesus is who he said he was. Professing your faith in Jesus as your Savior is not enough. It's following him, the Lord of Lords and the King of Kings. It's following him that matters. And you need to know that the journey that you follow with Jesus is not always easy. You may hear preaching talking about you just follow Jesus and everything works out. And I will tell you, everything works out, but it might not always work out to your liking. It's a journey. And in this moment with his disciples, Jesus was being honest. And this is not a bait and switch. He put it out there for everybody to see. He says, whoever wants to be my follower, whoever wants to be my disciple, must deny themselves, take up their cross, the thing that is meant for death, and follow me. And he knew it wouldn't be easy to just believe in him, because we know in Scripture that demons even believe in Jesus. But following him is what's going to have to happen next. Jesus said 3 things in this. I'm going to break those down real quick. First one is to deny yourself. And I think we know what denying yourself means. And when I think of it, I think back to the 1970s. There was a very famous experiment that was taking place out of the University of Stanford. You may have heard of it. It's called the marshmallow test, which is why. 5-second rule, hold on. There, now you'll never know which one it is. The marshmallow test, if you've never heard of it, was a test done with a bunch of young children, preschool, early elementary school children. And what it was is they would sit them in a room with a camera, and the instructor would come in and explain to them that, hey, here's a marshmallow for you, and it is yours. This belongs to you, and you can eat it. However, if you wait 15 minutes, you will receive 2. If you could refrain from eating the first one. And they would set it down. They would walk out of the room with the camera going on, and they would see what would happen. And the results were this. About 1/3 of the children were able to resist the marshmallow for the full 15 minutes. The others could not. Some just flat out ate it. Others just sat there and licked it. Because if you could still get the sweet, but it still looks like it's it. Those were the smart ones. Those were the engineers right there. But that's what happened. And about 1/3 of them were able to resist. So let me ask you. What are your marshmallows? I know what mine are. I know some of my marshmallows, the things that I love that I have to somehow deny myself are things like, did you know that this last week the new iPhone was talked about and being released, iPhone number 14, and from what I hear, it is so much better than my 13. Another one of mine is, this thing I have in my house. It's called a recliner, and right next to it is my table with the remote control that has the Netflix button on it. That's one of my things that I love. Or sleeping that extra 20 minutes, or social media, or the golf game that is on my phone. Those are some of mine. Maybe they're deeper ones, though. I don't know what it is for you here or online. Maybe it's that second or third drink, or maybe it's the accolades that you get from work because people give you the attaboys and the attagirls, or maybe it's fame, or maybe it's financial security and early retirement, or maybe it is being so secure in everything that everybody looks up to you. Or it seems like you are. I don't know. What is your marshmallow? What is that thing that you find so tempting to not give up, that you can't resist? And Jesus is saying to deny yourself. Listen, all of this, these are human concerns. And yeah, guess what? Some of these human concerns are really good things. And they are, and I believe God wants to bless you with some good things someday, with some of this stuff. But I think the real question is, does seeking after all of this stuff get in the way of following Jesus? I think that's what's going to challenge us over the next couple weeks. You see, when my life is all about my marshmallows and my stuff and my achievements and my status and my acceptance and my comfort, who are the people around me that I miss. I think one of the most dangerous places in the world is in my recliner with my remote control. What are the opportunities to serve God that I don't even notice because of all of these? So deny yourself. Burger King knows our human nature, right? For the last 40 years, they've had a slogan that says, you can what? Have it your way. And I liked that when I was younger because I could not stand mayonnaise on hamburgers, and they were one of the only ones who could actually take it off the burger for me. Don't even try to get mayonnaise on a burger. Trust me, I see it. I can sense it. Don't even scrape it off, because if you scrape it off, I know it was still there. I wanted it my way. One of the classic American singers sang a song, Frank Sinatra. You know what that song was? I did it my way. Yeah. You see, Jesus says to deny yourself, and I think he says it because if you don't know it or not, your dreams are way too small. My dreams for life are way too small. And if you're willing to deny yourself, I think God has got something so much better than a marshmallow for you. Deny yourself. Listen, denying yourself ultimately is about trust. You need to know that. Do you trust that if you deny yourself for God, that God is actually going to use you for a greater purpose? Do you really trust what Jesus said? That if I deny myself of worldly things, this particular pleasure, this aspect of comfort here, if I deny myself those things, do I really believe that God has a better plan? And will I trust that plan, even if it may not be for my benefit? Do I trust? See, trust, it means that I may not get some of the good things that I think are coming to me when I practice self-denial. My self-denial might actually be the very thing that benefits somebody else in this world and might actually make my life harder. But that's the first thing Jesus says that we need to do to be his disciple. Deny yourself. And then he said, take up your cross. And this is where it really got the attention of those first disciples. To us, not so much. You know, to them, they were talking about a literal death sentence. And listen, there are unbelievable number of Christians throughout history, like Bonhoeffer, who face death because of their faith. In fact, it still happens in parts of the world where simply saying Jesus is Lord is punishable by death. There are people literally hiding out to be able to do what we're doing right now. But for us, I mean, take up your cross, right? We get a cross on a necklace, right? We get a cross on our clothing. We can put the little cross logo on our car. If you're like me, you can get a really cool cross on a tattoo. And I also learned, and you can Google this you can Google it during service too. You can find a cross pillow that is body size so that if you're a side sleeper, you can hug that dude as you sleep. We can find crosses of all sorts of shapes and sizes, especially for our napping. Listen, I think Jesus probably would have preferred that one, right? The pillow cross. But he didn't have a choice what cross to take up. His cross came in one variety, and it was wood, and it was deadly, and it was one that would have been used by man after man after man before him. And we'll probably never face a literal crucifixion. So for us, the daily act of denying ourselves is what? I mean, it's saying, listen, I don't want to have a cross-shaped pillow kind of faith. I don't want to have a comfortable and easy faith. And so you ask questions. You ask things like, what in my life needs to die before God can truly rule my life? Maybe I'll give you some suggestions. Maybe it's forgiving that person, the one who doesn't deserve it. Maybe doing that might actually kill a little part of you. That's picking up your cross. Loving your enemies, that's picking up your cross. Holding money loosely so that your desire for the next great thing might feel like a little death, and that is taking up your cross. Not letting your family keep you from chasing after God's call on your life, hoping that they will support it, but not fearing what they would say. That's taking up your cross. Cutting sin out of your life will let you feel like something has died in your life. That's picking up your cross. Choosing to serve the poor in Kansas City is going to take you places that you never expected to go and is going to cost you more than you ever expected. That's taking up your cross. Is anything stirring in you? Is God talking to you? Maybe online, God talking to you as well. So, deny yourself. Take up your cross. And then the last one was follow me. And this is the expression that we hear. In fact, I don't know how many people say, you know what, I'm ashamed to use the label Christian. Instead, I just say I'm a follower of Jesus. That's what I do. You know, I don't like religion. I don't like church. I'm just a follower of Jesus because Jesus says, follow him. And that sounds really nice until you remember where Jesus went, right? I mean, it sounds great to follow Jesus, but eventually his 12 closest people, the one that physically saw his miracles, when it was time for Jesus to be crucified and dead, they all scattered. They didn't follow him. And so, what does it mean to follow Jesus? And to do so, I want to kind of come back to a Jewish perspective on this. You see, Jesus, he chose his disciples, these men that were going to follow him at the beginning of his public ministry. He said, come and follow me. They all dropped what they were doing. They went and did that. He was their leader. He was their rabbi, and he chose them. And we often think that following Jesus is about our choice, right? Because we're very individualistic, we are. But really from the start, before the disciples ever had a choice to follow Jesus, you have to realize that Jesus chose them first, right? Jesus chose them, said, come and follow me, and they did. They chose him as their rabbi, which is a teacher. It was an honor in those days to be chosen by a rabbi, to follow that rabbi around. And yes, Jesus as a rabbi, he was charismatic. He healed people. He delivered people. He chose people to follow him. And he chose the most unusual people, fishermen, tax collectors, people that weren't the elite. He didn't choose the young men who have spent their whole life learning the Torah, memorizing it, understanding it inside and out to be selected. No, Jesus was doing something unusual. He was choosing the most unlikely people to be his disciples, his followers. Now, the ancient Jews, they had a saying as well that captured this idea of a rabbi-teacher relationship, this discipleship relationship. And if you're a good rabbi, it said this, that you should cover yourself in the dust of the feet and drink in the words thirstily of your rabbi. That's an ancient Jewish saying there. Basically, follow close and listen fully. Drink it all in. The expression probably had its roots in a regular thing that people would have seen. You see, the idea was that you would follow so close behind your rabbi that if the rabbi stopped at a dime, you would actually knock him over. That's the way I look at it, that close. We've got 2 puppies at home, and I've got to tell you, if I stop really quick, they run into me, and then I step on them. But the idea was to be so close to your rabbi that the dust that comes off the rabbi's feet would actually coat you. Or when you're in a setting like this, you would sit so close to the rabbi's feet that any dirt and dust that was on their clothing would actually fall upon you. This is a powerful image that should describe what being a follower of Jesus really was, follower of a rabbi. Disciples were expected to follow so closely that they would be covered in the master's way of thinking, the master's way of living, the master's way of acting. In other words, so close that there should be something about the rabbi that rubs off of them. There should be something in their life that is so evident to everybody out there that they follow this rabbi. And thousands of years later, we're called to do the same. And so what does it look like to be these disciples that followed? What are some of the actions that we take? And again, we can go back to the very first church because they took some practical actions on what it looked like to follow their rabbi. And it says in the book of Acts, when the churches would come together in their homes, it says they devoted themselves to the apostles' teaching, meaning the words of the disciples, to fellowship, to the breaking of bread, and the prayers. And we can think of these as disciplines or for practices: prayer, community, meaning fellowship, the breaking of bread. People often talk about that as the Lord's Supper, but it was also every time they came together, they ate, which is a pretty Christian thing, right? But what's to say, where two or more gathered in his name, there will be a casserole, you know? You come together and you eat together, and they listen to the teachers, the apostles' teaching. This was how they got guidance on what it meant to follow Jesus. It would help them grow spiritually far beyond what little bit they could do and figure out just on their own. These 4 practices, prayer and fellowship and sacraments and the apostles' teaching, they were like the fuel that kept their faith going. And I believe that the more you live out those 4 things, the more you're going to encounter Jesus and ever anew coat yourself in the dust of the rabbi. So the question I want to ask is this: how prepared are you to get dirty? Is that the right way? How prepared are you to follow Jesus? Now, be clear. And many of you know this, but maybe it's a reminder. Jesus never said, clean yourself off and get perfect and then come and follow me. Jesus never said that. No, Jesus says, I know who you are, and I know how human you are. Just come and follow me anyway. Listen, if I've spent the majority of my life doing what's easy and doing what's comfortable and doing what I want, then am I really ready to follow Jesus in this life, even to the cross? The answer is no, I'm really not. But follow anyway. Just take a step and start. And then one last thing I want you to embrace, because remember, Jesus chose his disciples, right? He chose them before they ever chose him. And in that action, Jesus was saying one of the most life-changing statements that could ever be said to them or to you. Saying it without actually saying it. You see, in the first century, the rabbi's goal was choosing followers, finding men in this case, men who could not just follow. It wasn't about just having people to follow you around, to give you your accolades, to make you feel like you've made it. No, it was about choosing disciples that you believed could actually step into your sandals, so to speak, that could follow in your footsteps, that can do what you do, that say what you say. Essentially, Jesus, what he was doing with Peter and Matthew and John and Bartholomew and James, but by choosing them, what he's saying is, listen, gentlemen, I believe you could do what I do. Do you understand that? This isn't just about, hey, come, you go and follow Jesus because you believe in Jesus. What we know about this is actually Jesus from the very start says, come and follow me. Why? Because I believe in you. That's what he's saying. Come and follow me because I believe in you. I believe in you. Have you ever heard God say that? God believes in you. Now, how many of us would want to know God more and to have a love of God more, be closer to God? I think if you asked that for anybody who believed in a God, most of us would say, yeah, I do. And we tend to think that being closer to God means it's a feeling, that we have to feel closer, we got to think about God more, that we have to have this deeper sense of purpose and of peace and of presence in our life and confidence. And listen, those are all good things, but those are side effects of following Jesus. If you want to be closer to God, walk where Jesus walked. Share in Jesus' suffering. Pick up your cross and deny yourself and follow him. And then you'll start to have a deeper sense of peace and a deeper purpose and presence and confidence. It comes from daily or even moment by moment decisions to walk with Jesus on his road to the cross instead of away from the cross. In the very next verse, Jesus said this, that whoever wants to save their life will lose it, but whoever loses their life for me will find it. And listen, if you try clinging on to the things of life, your preferences, your needs, your wants, your desires, your marshmallows, if you try to cling on to those things, you'll lose them. But if you lose your life for Jesus, you will find life. You will.